Commander Zethkar stood before the massive viewing screen in the Galactic Council's war room, his four eyes scanning the holographic display that showed the current state of their losing battle against the Void Swarm. The insectoid creatures had appeared from the dark spaces between galaxies 3 cycles ago, consuming everything in their path like a plague of living darkness. "Another system has fallen," reported Admiral Vexana, her crystalline skin flickering with stress patterns. The Kepler defense grid lasted only 6 hours against their assault. The war room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the council chamber's environmental systems. Representatives from dozens of species stood around the circular platform, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and telepathic emanations that the universal translators struggled to process. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in frustration. As the current supreme commander of the Galactic Defense Force, he had overseen the loss of 47 star systems in the past month alone. The Void Swarm seemed unstoppable, their bioships regenerating damage faster than conventional weapons could inflict it, their numbers seemingly endless. "What about the Nexarian dreadnoughts?" asked Counselor Thrix, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Surely their plasma cannons can—" "Destroyed," Zethkar interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of countless defeats. "The swarm adapted to plasma energy after the third engagement. Their carapaces now absorb and redirect the energy back at our ships." A collective shudder ran through the assembled delegates. The Nexarians possessed the most advanced military technology in known space, their dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. If even they had fallen, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? Elder Morden of the Archive Keepers slowly rose from his meditation position, his ancient form supported by anti-gravity fields. As one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, his words carried tremendous weight among the council members. "There may be another option," he said, his voice barely above a whisper yet somehow audible throughout the chamber. "Though it requires us to consider possibilities that many here believe to be mere legend." The room erupted in a cacophony of sounds as dozens of species attempted to speak at once. Zethkar raised his primary arms, calling for silence with the authority of his position. "Speak, Elder Mordun. We are beyond the luxury of dismissing any possibility." The ancient being's eyes, clouded with age but still sharp with intelligence, focused on the holographic display showing the Void Swarm's advance. In the deepest archives of the Keepers, there exist records of a species that once fought a war against entities similar to the Swarm. These records speak of beings who possessed an unusual resistance to adaptation-based enemies. "You speak in riddles, Elder," Admiral Vexana said, her crystalline form shifting colors with impatience. "What species? Where are they now?" Morden's expression grew thoughtful, as if weighing the wisdom of revealing ancient secrets. "They called themselves humans. According to the archives, they emerged from a world they named Earth, located in what your charts would call the Sol system, in the outer rim of the Milky Way's spiral arm." A murmur of confusion rippled through the assembly. Most representatives exchanged glances or equivalent gestures of bewilderment, but a few of the older delegates showed signs of recognition. "I have heard whispers of such tales," admitted Counselor Yiltar of the Merchant Consortium. "Traders sometimes speak of ghost ships bearing unknown markings, vessels that appear and disappear without explanation. But surely these are just spacer stories, meant to frighten new pilots." "The archives suggest otherwise," Morden continued, his voice growing stronger as he delved deeper into the ancient records. "Humans were described as a peculiar species, neither the strongest nor the fastest, lacking advanced telepathic abilities or natural armor. Yet they possessed something that made them uniquely dangerous to enemies who relied on adaptation." Zethkar leaned forward, his military mind already working through possibilities. "What kind of something?" "Unpredictability," the elder replied, According to the records, humans fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and apparent madness that made them impossible to counter. They would employ strategies that defied logic, use weapons that seemed primitive yet proved devastatingly effective, and most importantly, they refused to follow patterns that adaptive enemies could learn from. Admiral Vexana's crystalline form flickered with skepticism. Even if these humans existed, the records you speak of must be thousands of cycles old. Where are they now? Why has no one encountered them in recent memory? Morden's ancient eyes seemed to look beyond the physical confines of the chamber. The final entries in the archive speak of the humans departing known space after their great war. They had grown weary of conflict and chose isolation over continued involvement in galactic affairs. The records suggest they withdrew to the far edges of the galaxy, beyond the reach of conventional sensors. "Fairy tales," scoffed General Crexton of the warrior caste, his armored carapace clicking as he shifted position. "You would have us chase myths while the swarm devours our worlds?" Before Morden could respond, a new voice cut through the chamber's atmosphere. Commander Yuki Tanaka stepped forward from the observation deck, where she had been monitoring the proceedings as Earth's sole representative to the Galactic Council. "The humans are not legends," she said quietly, her words carrying across the chamber with surprising clarity. "We never left." Every eye, sensor, and appendage capable of perception turned toward the small figure standing at the edge of the council floor. Yuki Tanaka appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. No natural weapons, no obvious technological enhancements, her bipedal form covered in what most species considered primitive fabric clothing. Yet something in her manner caused even the largest predators in the room to take notice. Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on her with new intensity. "Commander Tanaka, you've been Earth's observer for 3 cycles. If humans have the capability to fight the swarm, why have you not spoken before now?" Yuki stepped fully into the council chamber, her boots making soft sounds against the crystalline floor. Despite being surrounded by beings that could tear her apart without effort, she showed no sign of fear or intimidation. "Because humanity learned long ago that the galaxy prefers us to remain a myth," she replied, her voice steady and calm. "When we first joined the galactic community 2 centuries ago, our methods of warfare were considered too brutal, too unpredictable. The Council politely but firmly suggested that we limit our military involvement to our own system." "Your methods?" Admiral Vexana asked, her crystalline form shifting to a pattern that indicated curiosity mixed with concern. Yuki's expression remained neutral, but those observant enough noticed a slight hardening around her eyes. "We fight dirty, Admiral. We don't follow the accepted rules of engagement that most species consider civilized. We use deception, misdirection, and tactics that your military academies would classify as unnecessarily creative. We adapt faster than our enemies can learn because we assume from the start that they will try to learn from us." General Crexton's warrior instincts caused him to unconsciously shift into a more aggressive posture. "You speak of warfare as if it were some kind of art form. Combat is about strength, strategy, and superior technology." "Is it?" Yuki asked, her tone genuinely curious rather than challenging. "General, how many of your perfectly planned battles have you won against the Void Swarm?" The armored warrior's silence spoke volumes. Elder Morden leaned forward, his ancient mind connecting patterns that others missed. "Commander Tanaka, the archives speak of humans fighting entities that sound remarkably similar to the current swarm. Creatures that adapted to energy weapons, that learned from conventional tactics, that seemed unstoppable until they encountered human forces. Are you saying that humanity has faced this enemy before?" Yuki nodded slowly. "Not this exact swarm, but similar entities. About 400 years ago, Before we made contact with the galactic community, Earth was invaded by what we called the Hunger. Creatures from dark space that consumed everything organic and learned from every weapon we used against them. The chamber fell into complete silence. Even the environmental systems seemed to quiet, as if the station itself were listening. "What happened to them?" Zethkar asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. "We killed them all," Yuki replied with matter-of-fact simplicity. "It took us 12 years, cost us billions of lives, and forced us to develop weapons and tactics that the rest of the galaxy would probably consider war crimes. But we learned how to fight enemies that adapt faster than conventional military doctrine can counter." Admiral Vexana's crystalline form had gone completely transparent, a sign of shock among her species. "You're claiming that a single planet, with presumably inferior technology, defeated an enemy that the combined forces of the galaxy cannot stop." "I'm not claiming anything," Yuki said, pulling out a small device that projected a holographic display. "I'm showing you." The projection filled the center of the chamber, displaying what appeared to be a star chart of the local galactic region. However, instead of the expected systems and trade routes, the display showed something far more significant. Fleet positions, hundreds of them, scattered throughout space in patterns that defied conventional military doctrine. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various non-binary classifications," Yuki said, her formal tone contrasting sharply with the casual way she operated the device. "I present the current disposition of the United Earth Defense Fleet." Zethkar stared at the display, his military mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The fleet positions showed a level of strategic preparation that should have been impossible to hide from galactic sensors. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our long-range sensors would have detected fleet movements of this magnitude." "Would they?" Yuki asked, touching another control. The display zoomed in on what appeared to be empty space near the Void Swarm's current position. "Our ships don't show up on your sensors because they're designed specifically to avoid detection by the energy signatures that galactic technology uses for scanning." As the display focused, shapes began to appear in the apparently empty space. Ships unlike anything the Council had ever seen, angular where galactic vessels were curved, dark where others were bright, smaller than expected, but somehow radiating an aura of lethal capability. "Stealth technology," breathed Admiral Vexana, "but the energy requirements alone should make them detectable to gravimetric sensors." "Human engineering follows different principles than galactic standard," Yuki explained. "We learned a long time ago that being seen is usually a disadvantage in warfare. Our ships are designed to be ghosts until we want them to be something else." General Crexton studied the display with the eye of a professional warrior. Despite his earlier skepticism, he could recognize effective military positioning when he saw it. "Your fleet is already in position to strike the swarm's flanks. How long have you been planning this?" "Since the swarm first appeared," Yuki replied. "We've been tracking their movements, studying their adaptation patterns, and preparing countermeasures. The difference is that we've been doing it quietly, without the swarm realizing they were being watched." Elder Mordun's ancient voice carried a note of wonder. The archive spoke truly. Humans do indeed fight unlike any other species. Zethkar found himself faced with a decision that could determine the fate of the galaxy. Everything about this situation went against established protocol, against the careful diplomatic and military structures that had maintained galactic peace for centuries. Yet those same structures were failing against an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. "Commander Tanaka," he said finally, "what would humanity require to engage the Void Swarm?" Yuki's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. "Nothing. Commander Zethkar. We're not asking for payment or political concessions. The swarm represents an existential threat to all life in the galaxy, including Earth. We'll fight them regardless of what the Council decides." "Then why reveal yourselves now?" asked Counselor Thrix. "Why not continue operating in secret?" "Because this time we might need backup," Yuki admitted, her calm facade cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern. "The Void Swarm is larger and more organized than the Hunger we fought centuries ago. Human tactics can give us an advantage, but if we fail, the galaxy needs to be ready with conventional forces to continue the fight." The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives of dozens of species debated among themselves in languages that ranged from harmonic to electromagnetic. Some argued for immediately accepting human assistance. Others worried about the precedent of involving an unknown military force in galactic affairs. Zeth-Kar raised his arms for silence once again. When order was restored, he turned to face Yuki directly. "Commander Tanaka, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Force, I formally request human assistance in the war against the Void Swarm." Yuki nodded once, then touched her communication device. "Admiral Chen, this is Observer Tanaka. The Council has formally requested our assistance. You are authorized to decloak and begin Operation Midnight Sun." The response crackled through the chamber's speakers in accented Standard Galactic, though the voice carried an unmistakable note of satisfaction. "Copy that, Observer. All fleet units, this is Admiral Chen. The Ghost protocols are officially terminated. Show these bugs what Earth's children learned in the dark." As if summoned by the transmission, alerts began sounding throughout the Council station. The tactical displays that monitored the Void Swarm's advance suddenly filled with new contacts, hundreds of them, appearing as if materializing from nothingness in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. Admiral Vexana stared at the displays in shock. "They're everywhere. How did they get so many ships into position without our sensors detecting them?" "The same way humans have survived in a galaxy full of species stronger, faster, and more technologically advanced than us," Yuki replied. "We learn to be very, very good at not being seen until we want to be." The chamber watched in fascination and growing awe as the human fleet began its attack on the Void Swarm. Unlike the massive, powerful energy weapons that galactic navies favored, the human ships seemed to dance around their enemies, using weapons that appeared almost primitive by galactic standards, yet proved devastatingly effective. "Kinetic weapons?" General Crexton asked, his warrior's instincts recognizing the tactical displays. "They're using projectile weapons against bioships?" "Among other things," Yuki confirmed. "Kinetic weapons don't give off energy signatures for the swarm to adapt to. They're just chunks of matter moving very, very fast. Hard to evolve a defense against physics." On the displays, human ships wove through swarm formations with an almost organic fluidity, their weapons creating patterns of destruction that seemed random but were clearly precisely calculated. Where swarm bioships attempted to adapt to one type of attack, the humans immediately switched to completely different tactics. "They're not following any conventional battle doctrine," observed Admiral Vexana, her crystalline form flickering with patterns of amazement. "Their movements appear chaotic, but they're achieving tactical objectives that should require much larger forces." "That's because we don't fight like you do," Yuki explained, her eyes fixed on the tactical displays. "Galactic military doctrine assumes that battles follow certain patterns, that there are rules both sides will observe. Humans learned long ago that the only rule in war is to win." As they watched, a group of swarm bioships began adapting to the kinetic weapons, their carapaces thickening to absorb impacts. In response, the human ships immediately switched tactics, deploying what appeared to be some form of viral weapon that caused the bioships to attack each other. "Biological warfare," Elder Mordun observed, his voice carrying notes of both admiration and unease. "They turned the swarm's own adaptation mechanisms against them." We learned from our previous experience, Yuki said. Enemies that adapt quickly can be tricked into adapting in the wrong direction. The battle continued to unfold on the displays, but already it was clear that something fundamental had changed. For the first time since the Void Swarm had appeared, they were not advancing. Instead, they were retreating, their bioships unable to develop effective countermeasures against an enemy that refused to fight the same way twice. Commander Zethkar found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about warfare, about humanity, and about the legends that had shaped galactic history. Commander Tanaka, he said quietly, I believe the galaxy owes humanity an apology. We should never have dismissed your people as mere legends. Yuki's expression softened slightly, the first sign of genuine emotion she had shown during the entire proceedings. No apology necessary, Commander. Sometimes it's better to be underestimated. But I think it's time the galaxy learned that humans never really left. We've been here all along, watching, learning, and preparing for the day when we might be needed again. As the tactical displays continued to show human forces systematically dismantling Void Swarm formations, the members of the Galactic Council began to understand that they were witnessing the return of something that had never truly been gone, a species that fought not with overwhelming power or advanced technology, but with an unpredictability that made them the perfect enemy for creatures that thrived on adaptation. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching through the tactical display as her fleet continued its systematic dismantling of the Void Swarm's outer formations. The flagship's bridge was a study in controlled chaos, dozens of human officers working at stations that would have seemed primitive to galactic observers, their movements precise and economical. Admiral, Raptor Squadron reports successful deployment of the Trojan protocols, reported Commander James Park from the communications station. The swarm ships are beginning to exhibit friendly fire incidents in sectors 7 through 12. Chen nodded, her expression remaining calm, despite the magnitude of the battle unfolding around them. At 53, she had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 30 years, rising through ranks during the period when humanity had supposedly withdrawn from galactic affairs. She knew better than most that Earth had never truly been isolated. They had simply learned to watch without being watched. "What's the adaptation rate on the kinetic shells?" she asked, turning to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos checked her displays before responding. Approximately 14% improvement in carapace density over the last 3 hours, well within acceptable parameters. The swarm is adapting to yesterday's ammunition, not today's. Excellent. Signal all kinetic batteries to switch to the tungsten-depleted uranium composite rounds. Let them adapt to something that doesn't exist yet. As the orders were transmitted across the fleet, Chen allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony of their situation. The galaxy had spent centuries dismissing human military doctrine as too chaotic, too unpredictable for civilized warfare. Now that same unpredictability was the only thing standing between civilization and complete annihilation. "Admiral," called out Commander Rebecca Torres from the sensor station, "we're getting communications from the Galactic Defense Force. Commander Zethkar is requesting permission to coordinate joint operations." Chen considered this for a moment. Joint operations with galactic forces would require revealing human tactical methods that Earth had kept secret for generations. On the other hand, the Void Swarm's numbers were staggering. Even human unpredictability had limits when facing an enemy that could absorb losses that would cripple conventional fleets. "Patch me through to Commander Zethkar. And Torres, make sure Observer Tanaka is included in the communication." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Galactic Council's war room. Commander Zethkar's four-eyed visage appeared alongside Commander Tanaka's familiar face. Along with several other galactic representatives, that Chen recognized from intelligence briefings. Admiral Chen, Zethkar's translated voice carried through the bridge speakers. The Council formally thanks humanity for its intervention. Your forces have achieved in hours what our fleets could not accomplish in months. Don't thank us yet, Commander, Chen replied, gesturing to a tactical display that showed the broader strategic situation. We've hurt them, but we haven't stopped them. The swarm has approximately 40% of its total force concentrated in the core systems. Our current engagement represents less than 15% of their total strength. The assembled galactic leaders exchanged glances that didn't require translation. Even their universal communicators couldn't disguise the dismay in their body language. "What are you proposing?" asked Admiral Vexana, her crystalline form shifting to patterns that indicated both hope and trepidation. Chen's expression grew serious as she activated a holographic display that filled the space between the two command centers. The projection showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with current swarm positions marked in red, human forces in blue, and galactic assets in green. "The swarm's main strength is concentrated here," she said, highlighting a cluster of systems near the galactic core. They've established what appears to be a breeding complex, using consumed organic matter to rapidly produce new bioships. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a coordinated push that will overwhelm the remaining galactic defenses. Your intelligence? General Crexton's warrior instincts were clearly troubled by the implications. How long have humans been gathering intelligence on the swarm? Since before they arrived, Chen replied matter-of-factly. Earth maintains long-range monitoring stations in dark space. We detected the swarm's approach approximately 6 months before their first attack. We've been studying them, learning their patterns, and preparing countermeasures. The silence from the galactic representatives spoke volumes. Commander Tanaka's expression remained neutral, but Chen could read the slight tension in her posture that indicated she was concerned about revealing too much of Earth's capabilities. "Admiral," Elder Morden's ancient voice carried clearly through the transmission. "You speak of countermeasures. What do you propose?" Chen highlighted specific points on the galactic map, her movements precise and confident. "The swarm's adaptation mechanism has a critical weakness. It requires time to analyze and respond to new threats. Our preliminary engagements confirm that their adaptation cycle averages between 2 and 4 hours, depending on the complexity of the stimulus." "That seems like an advantage for them," observed Counselor Thrix, his tentacles writhing with confusion. 4 hours is insufficient time to develop new weapons or tactics." "For galactic military doctrine, yes," Chen agreed, "but human tactical philosophy operates on different principles. We don't develop new weapons during combat. We bring multiple incompatible weapon systems and switch between them faster than the enemy can adapt." To demonstrate, Chen activated a recording from the current battle. The display showed human ships engaging swarm biovessels with kinetic weapons until the swarm began developing armor. The moment adaptation was detected, the human ships seamlessly switched to energy weapons of a completely different frequency. When the swarm began adapting to those, the humans deployed biological weapons that turned the creature's own reproduction systems against them. "You're using completely different technological paradigms," Admiral Vexana observed, her crystalline structure flickering with patterns of amazement. "Energy, kinetic, biological. Most species develop expertise in 1 or 2 areas. Humans appear to have mastered them all." "Necessity," Chen replied simply. "When you're a relatively weak species in a galaxy full of stronger ones, you learn to use every tool available. We've had centuries to develop weapons and tactics that other species dismissed as inefficient or impractical." Commander Zethkar leaned forward, his 4 eyes focusing intently on the human admiral. "What do you need from us?" "Bait," Chen said bluntly, causing several galactic representatives to recoil in shock. "The swarm's main force is too concentrated and too well defended for our current fleet strength to assault directly. We need to draw them out. Force them to disperse their forces across multiple engagement zones." You want us to sacrifice our remaining fleets as diversions? General Crexton's outrage was evident despite the translation systems. I want you to do what you do best, Chen corrected. Fight a conventional battle with conventional tactics. The swarm will respond with conventional adaptations, which will position them perfectly for unconventional solutions. Chen activated another display, this one showing detailed tactical projections. Galactic forces engage the swarm here, here, and here. She indicated 3 star systems at the edge of swarm-controlled space. Use your standard energy weapons, follow established battle doctrine, make the engagement look like every other battle you've fought against them. And while they're adapting to our tactics? Zethkar asked, though his military mind was already beginning to grasp the strategy. Human strike forces will hit their breeding complex with weapons and tactics they've never encountered before, Chen explained. By the time they realized the galactic engagements were diversions, their ability to rapidly replace losses will be severely compromised. Admiral Vexana's form shifted to patterns indicating deep concern. Admiral Chen, you're asking us to commit our remaining forces to what are essentially suicide missions. Chen's expression softened slightly, the first sign of emotion she had shown during the briefing. I'm asking you to trust that humanity knows how to fight enemies that adapt. Your forces won't be sacrificed, they'll be protected by human assets that the swarm won't see coming. Protected how? Zethkar demanded. Chen gestured to Commander Park, who activated a new display showing the current disposition of human forces. The earlier tactical map had shown only the ships currently engaged with the swarm. This new display revealed something far more extensive, a network of human assets positioned throughout galactic space. For 200 years, the galaxy has believed that humanity withdrew from galactic affairs, Chen explained. In reality, we've been building the largest distributed defense network in galactic history. Hidden bases, stealth observation platforms, disguised commercial vessels, and reserve fleets positioned in systems that galactic surveys classified as uninhabited. The scale of the revelation was staggering. The display showed thousands of human assets, from small monitoring stations to major fleet bases, scattered across the galaxy in a pattern that suggested centuries of careful planning. This is impossible, whispered Admiral Vexana. The resources required for such a network would exceed the gross domestic product of most galactic civilizations. Earth has unique advantages, Chen replied. Our industrial base was built to support a global population of over 20 billion during our expansion period. When we withdrew from galactic affairs, we redirected that industrial capacity toward defensive preparations. Elder Mordun's ancient eyes studied the display with the careful attention of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. You've been preparing for this specific threat for centuries. We've been preparing for existential threats in general, Chen corrected. The Void Swarm is similar to the hunger we fought 400 years ago, but they're not identical. Our preparations are designed to counter any enemy that relies on rapid adaptation as their primary advantage. Commander Tanaka stepped forward, her role as Earth's observer giving her unique insight into both perspectives. What Admiral Chen is proposing requires a level of trust that has never existed between humanity and the galactic community. Trust. General Crexton's warrior instincts bristled at the concept. They've been lying to us for 2 centuries about their capabilities. We've been protecting you, Chen replied, her voice carrying an edge that reminded everyone present that they were speaking with a military officer who had just proved capable of fighting an enemy the galaxy couldn't stop. Do you think the Nexarian Empire would have remained peaceful if they had known that human industrial capacity exceeded their own by orders of magnitude? Would the Merchant Consortium have honored trade agreements if they had realized that human ships could move through their space completely undetected? The uncomfortable silence that followed her words was broken by Commander Zethkar. Admiral Chen, assuming we agree to this plan, What guarantees do we have that humanity won't use its revealed capabilities for conquest after the swarm is defeated? Chen's expression grew thoughtful. The same guarantee you've had for the past 2 centuries, Commander. Earth has never shown interest in galactic domination. We withdrew from galactic politics because we found them tedious, not because we were planning conquest. That's hardly reassuring, observed Counselor Thrix. Then consider this, Chen replied, her tone becoming more formal. In the next 6 hours, human forces will begin operations against the swarm's breeding complex. We will do this with or without galactic cooperation. If we succeed without your help, humanity will have single-handedly saved the galaxy from an existential threat. If we fail, the galaxy dies anyway. The brutal logic of her statement was undeniable. However, Chen continued, if we work together, we demonstrate that the galaxy can face existential threats as a unified force rather than as separate species fighting individual battles. That precedent might be useful the next time something emerges from dark space with an appetite for organic matter. Admiral Vexana's crystalline form had shifted to a pattern that indicated deep contemplation. You believe there will be more threats like the swarm? I know there will be, Chen replied with certainty. The universe is vast and mostly empty. When something evolves in that emptiness, it tends to develop an appetite for places that aren't empty. The swarm won't be the last. Elder Morden spoke into the contemplative silence that followed her words. The archives speak of cycles, Admiral Chen. Periods of expansion followed by periods of consolidation, with existential threats serving as catalysts for evolutionary leaps. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to evolve beyond the assumption that strong species protect weak ones. What are you suggesting, Elder? Zethkar asked. That perhaps the strongest species in the galaxy has been protecting all the others for 2 centuries, and we never realized it, the ancient being replied, his eyes focused on Admiral Chen. The question is whether we're wise enough to accept that protection gracefully. Chen's tactical display updated with new information, showing the swarm's forces beginning to mobilize in response to the ongoing human attacks. I need an answer, Commander Zethkar. The window for coordinated action is closing rapidly. Zethkar looked around the war room at the assembled representatives of dozens of species, each grappling with the revelation that their understanding of galactic power structures had been fundamentally wrong for centuries. On behalf of the Galactic Defense Force, he said finally, humanity has our cooperation. What are your orders, Admiral? Chen's smile was the first genuine expression of warmth she had shown during the entire exchange. Thank you, Commander. Here's what we're going to do. As the human admiral began outlining the most audacious military operation in galactic history, the assembled representatives began to understand that they were witnessing more than just a battle plan. They were seeing the birth of a new era of galactic cooperation, forged in the crucible of humanity's secret war against the darkness between stars. The coordinated assault on the Void Swarm's breeding complex began exactly 72 hours after the Galactic Council's agreement to humanity's plan. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching as hundreds of ships from dozens of species prepared to execute the most complex military operation in galactic history. Admiral, all galactic forces report ready for diversionary engagements, Commander Park announced from his station. Commander Zethkar signals that his task forces are in position at targets Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. And our deep strike assets? Chen asked, turning to Lieutenant Colonel Santos at the tactical station. Ghost Fleet reports all systems green, Santos replied, her voice carrying the professional calm that masked the magnitude of what they were attempting. Admiral Morrison signals ready to commence Operation Phantom Strike on your command. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the disposition of forces across multiple star systems. The galactic diversionary fleets were positioned exactly as planned, ready to engage swarm forces with conventional tactics that would draw attention away from the real target. Meanwhile, hidden in the dark spaces between stars, the human deep strike force prepared to assault the swarm's breeding complex with weapons that had never been tested in combat. "Signal all units," Chen commanded. "Operation Midnight Sun is now active. Execute Phase 1. Across 3 star systems, galactic defense forces launched their attacks against swarm positions. Admiral Vexana's crystalline ships opened fire with their signature plasma cannons, while General Crexton's armored vessels unleashed volleys of quantum torpedoes. The attacks were powerful, coordinated, and exactly what the swarm expected from galactic military doctrine. Chen watched the tactical displays as the swarm responded precisely as predicted. Bioships began adapting to the energy weapons, their carapaces shifting to absorb and redirect the familiar attack patterns. More importantly, reserve forces began moving from the breeding complex toward the diversionary engagements. "Swarm response is nominal," reported Commander Torres from the sensor station. "Adaptation protocols are engaging as expected. They're committing approximately 30% of their reserve strength to counter the galactic forces." "Time for Phase 2, Chen said, activating the secure communication channel to Admiral Morrison's Ghost Fleet. "Robert, you are cleared for approach. Remember, once you decloak, you'll have approximately 4 hours before they adapt to our new toys." The response came through the encrypted channel with crystal clarity. "Copy that, Sarah. Ghost Fleet is moving to attack position. Target acquisition in progress." On a secondary display, Chen watched as the most advanced ships in the human fleet emerged from stealth positions that had been carefully prepared over the past 6 months. Unlike the vessels currently engaged with swarm forces, these ships represented the absolute pinnacle of human military technology, weapons and systems that even the Earth Defense Fleet's own personnel had never seen in action. The Ghost Fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each one unique in design and armament. The lead ship, UES Pandemonium, carried what human scientists had designated as a causality disruptor, a weapon that attacked the quantum foundations of matter itself. The UES Nemesis mounted arrays of probability bombs that altered local physics to make certain outcomes impossible. Most disturbing of all was the UES Harbinger, equipped with what the research teams euphemistically called temporal artillery. "Admiral," Commander Park said, his voice carrying a note of concern that hadn't been present during the conventional phase of the battle. "Are we certain these weapons won't cause collateral damage to nearby systems?" Chen's expression grew serious. "The probability calculations suggest acceptable risk levels, but honestly, James, we're entering uncharted territory. These weapons were designed as last resort options for enemies that couldn't be stopped by conventional means." "Like the Void Swarm," observed Lieutenant Colonel Santos, "exactly like the Void Swarm." The tactical displays updated as Ghost Fleet reached attack position near the swarm's breeding complex. The facility itself was a nightmare fusion of organic growth and deliberate construction, spreading across multiple asteroids and planetary bodies in a solar system that had once supported a thriving galactic civilization. "Target acquired," Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. "Beginning weapon deployment. All ships, activate exotic armaments and prepare for temporal displacement protocols." Chen felt a chill run down her spine as she gave the final authorization. "Weapons-free, Ghost Fleet. Show them what happens when humans decide to break the rules of physics." What followed challenged every assumption about the nature of warfare in the civilized galaxy. The UES Pandemonium's causality disruptor fired first, creating a bubble of space-time where cause and effect became negotiable. Swarm bioships that entered the affected area began aging rapidly, their adaptation mechanisms attempting to counter an attack that existed outside normal temporal flow. The UES Nemesis deployed its probability bombs, creating zones where the mathematical probability of swarm bioships functioning correctly approached zero. Creatures that had adapted to every conventional weapon found themselves literally unable to exist in their current form, their biological systems refusing to operate according to altered physical laws. But it was the UES Harbinger that delivered the most devastating blow. Its temporal artillery fired shells that arrived at their targets before they were launched, creating causality loops that trapped swarm bioships in recursive destruction cycles. "Jesus Christ," whispered Commander Torres, staring at sensor readings that defied rational interpretation. "The breeding complex is unraveling. Not destroyed, not damaged. It's ceasing to exist in any meaningful sense." Admiral Chen watched the displays with mixed feelings of triumph and unease. Humanity had developed these weapons during the dark years after the Hunger's invasion, when Earth's brightest minds had been tasked with creating defenses against enemies that conventional physics couldn't stop. The fact that they worked was both reassuring and terrifying. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from the diversionary fleets," Commander Park reported. "Commander Zethkar reports that swarm forces are beginning to disengage from all three sectors. They're attempting to retreat toward the breeding complex." "Too late for that," Chen replied, watching as the exotic weapons continued their work. "Signal all galactic forces to pursue the retreating swarm units. Don't let them regroup." As the battle continued to unfold, Chen received a priority communication from Earth Command. The face of Admiral Elizabeth Harper, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, appeared on her personal display. "Sarah, we're monitoring your engagement from Earth. The exotic weapons are performing within acceptable parameters, but we're detecting some unusual quantum signatures." "Unusual how?" Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "The swarm appears to be attempting to adapt to the causality disruptors," Admiral Harper replied. "Our xenobiology teams are seeing biological changes that shouldn't be possible under normal physics." Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's environmental systems. "They're adapting to weapons that alter the fundamental nature of reality." "It appears so. Which means we may have found an enemy that can evolve beyond the constraints of known physics." The implications were staggering. If the swarm could adapt to weapons that operated outside normal space-time, they represented a threat beyond anything humanity had previously encountered. "Admiral," Lieutenant Colonel Santos called out, her voice tight with concentration. "We're detecting massive energy signatures from the swarm's remaining forces. They appear to be... I'm not sure how to describe this." "Try," Chen commanded. "They're changing, Admiral. Not just adapting to our weapons, but fundamentally altering their basic nature. Some of them are beginning to exist partially outside normal space-time." Chen stared at the tactical displays as she processed this information. The swarm wasn't just an invasive species. They were something that could evolve beyond the basic laws of physics that governed the universe. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We are facing an enemy that has begun adapting beyond conventional physics. Switch to Protocol 7. All weapons, all tactics, maximum unpredictability." Protocol 7 was the most extreme combat doctrine in human military history, developed specifically for enemies that could adapt to any consistent pattern. It required human forces to abandon all conventional military thinking and operate in complete chaos, using randomized tactics that even friendly forces couldn't predict. Across the battle zone, human ships began implementing Protocol 7. Weapons fired in patterns that violated military logic, ships moved according to navigation plans generated by quantum random number generators, and tactical decisions were made by algorithms designed to be as unpredictable as possible. The effect on the swarm was immediate and dramatic. Creatures that had begun adapting to exotic physics suddenly found themselves facing attacks that followed no pattern whatsoever. Their adaptation mechanisms, finely tuned for rapid response to consistent threats, began failing when confronted with true randomness. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported with amazement in her voice, "the swarm's adaptation rate is dropping rapidly. They can't develop counters to tactics that have no underlying logic." Chen allowed herself a small smile. "That's the thing about human military doctrine. Just when you think you understand it, we change the rules." The communication system crackled with Admiral Morrison's voice from the Ghost Fleet. "Admiral Chen, the breeding complex is completely neutralized. Recommend we begin Phase 3 while the swarm is still confused by our random tactics." "Agreed, Robert. All units commence Phase 3. Time to finish this." Phase 3 was the culmination of humanity's two-century preparation for existential threats. Hidden bases throughout the galaxy activated simultaneously, revealing the true scope of human military presence. Reserve fleets that had remained concealed for generations emerged from dark space, while weapons platforms hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae came online. Commander Zethkar's voice came through the communication system, his tone carrying notes of awe and disbelief. "Admiral Chen, our sensors are detecting human assets in systems we had classified as uninhabited. The scale of your preparations is incomprehensible." 200 years is a long time to prepare for war, Commander," Chen replied. "And humans are very good at planning for worst-case scenarios." The final phase of the battle unfolded with devastating efficiency. Swarm forces, already confused by random human tactics and crippled by the loss of their breeding complex, found themselves surrounded by enemies that had appeared from nowhere. Human weapons platforms, carefully positioned over decades, created crossfire zones that made escape impossible. More importantly, the diverse array of human weapon systems made adaptation impossible. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, exotic physics manipulators, biological warfare agents, and technologies that operated on principles unknown to galactic science created a constantly shifting threat environment that overwhelmed the swarm's ability to respond. "Admiral," Lieutenant Colonel Santos reported, "swarm forces are beginning to fragment. Individual bioships are attempting to flee toward dark space." "Let them go," Chen ordered. "Signal all pursuit units to maintain engagement only until swarm forces leave inhabited space." "We're not starting a war of extermination." "Ma'am, if they escape, they could return with adaptations to our weapons," Commander Park pointed out. "James, if they're capable of surviving what we just threw at them and developing effective countermeasures, then they deserve to survive," Chen replied. "Besides, any swarm remnants that return will face a galaxy that now knows how to fight adaptive enemies." As the battle drew to its conclusion, Chen opened communication channels to the galactic forces that had participated in the operation. The screen filled with representatives from dozens of species, their expressions ranging from amazement to concern to something approaching fear. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications," Chen said formally, "the immediate threat from the Void Swarm has been neutralized. Their breeding complex is destroyed, their main force is scattered, and their ability to rapidly replace losses has been eliminated." "Admiral Chen," Commander Zethkar said, his 4 eyes focused intently on her image, "I believe the galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid." "No debt," Chen replied firmly. "We did what we had to do to protect all life in the galaxy. That includes human life." Elder Morden's ancient voice carried clearly through the communication system. "Admiral, the archives spoke truly of humanity's unique nature, but they failed to mention the most important characteristic of your species." "Which is?" "Your capacity for sacrifice without expectation of reward." Chen's expression softened slightly. "Elder, humanity learned long ago that individual species don't survive existential threats. Only the galaxy survives, or it doesn't. We chose to be part of something larger than ourselves. Admiral Vexana's crystalline form shifted to patterns that indicated deep respect. What happens now, Admiral? How does the galaxy move forward knowing what we now know about human capabilities? Chen considered the question carefully before responding. That depends on what the galaxy wants, Admiral. Humanity has demonstrated that we can defend against existential threats, but we have no interest in dominating or controlling other species. We're willing to remain in the shadows or step into the light as the galactic community prefers. And if we choose to ask for your help in preparing for future threats? Asked General Crexton, his warrior's instincts clearly grappling with the implications of human military superiority. Then we help, Chen replied simply. Humans are good at teaching others to be unpredictable. It might be useful to have a galaxy full of species that can fight adaptive enemies. As the communication session continued, Chen reflected on the magnitude of what had just occurred. For 2 centuries, humanity had hidden in the shadows, protecting a galaxy that didn't know it needed protection. Now they stood revealed, their capabilities exposed, their methods demonstrated. The question was whether the galaxy would accept humanity as partners or fear them as potential conquerors. Admiral, Commander Park said quietly, his voice intended only for her ears. Do you think we made the right choice, revealing ourselves like this? Chen smiled, watching as representatives from dozens of species continued their discussions about the future of galactic defense. James, for the first time in 200 years, humanity isn't fighting alone. I'd say that's worth the risk. As the UES Defiant began its journey back to Earth, Admiral Chen allowed herself to hope that the galaxy had learned something important from their encounter with the Void Swarm. Not about human military capabilities, but about the value of cooperation between species with different strengths and perspectives. The legends were real, and they had chosen to remain part of the galaxy they had sworn to protect. Now it remained to be seen whether the galaxy would prove worthy of that protection. In the depths of space, scattered remnants of the Void Swarm fled toward the darkness between galaxies, carrying with them the hard-earned knowledge that the universe contained species capable of fighting beyond the boundaries of physics itself. They would not return soon, if ever. And in the civilized systems of the galaxy, a new era of cooperation began, built on the foundation of humanity's patient vigil in the shadows and their willingness to step into the light when darkness threatened all life. The legends had returned, not as conquerors, but as guardians, and the galaxy would never be the same. The legends were real, and they had come to save the galaxy.